We've got staff back there that just hold up your hand and they will get you cards and pens. Excellent. All right, good evening. I'm Steve Woods of the Freshwater Society. Welcome to the Moos Family Speaker Series on Water Resources presented jointly by the Freshwater Society and the U of M's College of Biological Sciences. Met Council is sponsoring the talk tonight, and they put George through his paces earlier today for a few hours down at Met Council headquarters. Talks like this don't happen without sponsors like Met Council, and many of the people are in the room here tonight. When you were offered those question cards on your way in, probably got a membership envelope. We pick up a few members at every one of these talks, and we hope that you'll consider becoming one of our sustaining members tonight. It really helps bring in this programming and also other things that we do, such as our recently released report as of last Thursday, The Water Underground. It's a first in a series of 3 groundwater reports dealing with sustainable groundwater issues, and it's pretty much 99% targeted at public water supplies. And those are available on the tables outside, and you'll see them on your way out tonight. If you're new to us, let me explain how the evening works. George is going to give the best 45 to 60-minute presentation you've ever heard on wastewater. That's a high bar. Typically what we do after the speaker's done is we've had panelists over here on stage right fielding questions from the audience. But the funny thing about running a mega wastewater plant is that there aren't a whole lot of mega wastewater plant experts around. So we have a lone panelist tonight with Lisa Thompson from Met Council. Dr. Valerie Forbes, the newly minted Dean of the College of Biological Sciences here, will be moderating a discussion, more so than a panel. And we'll see where the discussion goes as these 2 directors of very large wastewater facilities flow with the conversation. We've been pulling together tonight's program for about 5 months, and it was at our, I think, the first conference call that we had where George mentioned something about, I'm on the receiving end of everything that's society, and I think you even used the word culture, of what our culture decides to ingest or otherwise send down through the sewer systems. And whether that's the latest pharmacological wonder or a marketer's bright idea to come up with flushable wipes that need to be thrown in the trash, not flushed. Well, you owe me for that, by the way. All that heads down through $1 billion worth of pumps and pipes and facilities, and somehow his community, relying on that wastewater plant, expects him to deal with it. And the drinking water plant expects him to deal with an awful lot of that as well. And that's what we do as society. Somehow we flush and it goes somewhere and something happens. And the array of things that are having to be dealt with keeps growing every year. It's no accident at all that this talk follows our previous speaker, Bill Stowe, who was from the Des Moines Waterworks. Recall that City of Des Moines down there has gotten tired of fielding the downstream costs of upstream decisions. There's an element of that resonates through this as well. We're kind of getting both sides of the water treatment world here. So tonight we are pleased to have George Hawkins with us. He is the CEO and General Manager of the District of Columbia Water and Sewer Authority, otherwise known by its spiffy moniker of DC Water. Rolls trippingly off the tongue. With an operating and capital budget of nearly $1 billion, DC Water provides drinking water delivery and wastewater collection for the District of Columbia and another 1.6 million residents located in several counties of Maryland and Virginia. So it's pretty expansive. The authority operates the world's largest advanced wastewater treatment plant at Blue Plains. Capacity 370 MGD, although because of CSO issues, combined sewer, rainfall issues, they have a peak capacity of more than 1 billion gallons per day, or BGD. Taking a flyer on that acronym. He's leading cultural change within DC Water and building strong relationships with local and national advocates, which is kind of how we found out about him. He speaks at a lot of places and in very expansive terms, and he's helping raise everybody's game. Prior to joining DC Water, he served as director of the district's Department of the Environment side of the operations, which very similar to what we see here with Met Council with what they're looking at for compliance with environmental requirements, regulating the use and disposal of toxic substances, preserving the habitat for fish and wildlife, and implementing stormwater management regs to minimize pollution into the district waterways. He also launched and chaired the Mayor's Green Team to coordinate sustainability programs across 40 agencies, and created a summer job corps that grew into the largest green jobs program for youth in the country. Really works in a lot of different areas, and he has degrees with honors from both Princeton and Harvard Law School, and is currently teaching environmental law and policy at the Princeton Environment Institute. This all adds up to what was a very interesting dinner last night, and the conversation ranged extremely widely, and it was a lot of fun, and I think he's going to provide us a pretty good program tonight as well. So please, let's welcome George Hawkins.
Good evening. My name is George Hawkins. I have the honor and pleasure of being the Chief Executive and General Manager of DC Water. And I'm really, really delighted to be here tonight. And as I was sitting here, it always reminds me of other nights. And I remember one in particular, that the call came in at Friday at 11:30. And why these calls always come in on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, I do not know. But we had a water main break on Constitution Avenue. It was a 48-inch force main, I mean a big water main. It was shooting water, and every major news organization was headed that way. I got the alert, and so I ran downstairs. I lived not far from there, near the Navy Yard. And got to my car and realized, note to self, not a good idea to drive to a giant water main break in a Volt. I now still drive one of those cars, but parked far away. But I drove up to the water main break silently in my Volt. I got there first because I lived near where the break occurred. I came around the corner, stopped the car on the side, jumped out, and was running down Constitution Ave. Constitution Ave, all into D.C., is gigantic. It's one of these huge main roads, right down one of the middle roads. Constitution on one side, Independence on the other, the National Mall. And I'm running down the street, and the water main break was so big that water was coming up from everywhere. So when you have all that water pouring in under the ground coming out of the break, it seeks anywhere it can get to the surface. So every street light, a sign that would break the concrete, water would be shooting up by the sign. It was shooting up near where the break was itself in the air like a geyser. And it had actually kicked Constitution Avenue up 1.5 feet. So it looked like an earthquake had hit. So I was running, but you can't really tell where the water main is because there's water. It looks like a water park. Like kids should be running around because there's water shooting up everywhere, all over the place. And one other guy, I was the first one there. DDOT hadn't gotten there. Police really hadn't gotten there yet because I lived so close. I was able to zip right around the corner, jump out of the car, and run down the street. I had one guy on site, which is the one who had alerted me, and he says, "We've got to stop cars from turning onto Constitution Avenue." This is Friday night at 11:30. Because when all that water pours out of the pipe and it's digging out all the dirt underneath the road, it can create a sinkhole and your car can go in. So I'm running down, I stand in the street, middle of Constitution, stop, halting the traffic in the middle of it, with water pouring out behind us, ABC News, NBC News, all the news trucks are coming in. And I remember thinking to myself as I was standing there, good God Almighty, what have I got myself into? This must be the craziest decision I've ever made, is to come to DC Water. By the way, that water main break, think of the places that you don't really want to flood. At that corner, 10th Street and Constitution Avenue, the water is pouring out, flooding in every direction. On the right corner of that, I have to stand in the light. Oh gosh, okay. In the right corner of of where the break was is the Department of Justice. On the left corner of where that break was is the Internal Revenue Service. And I was flooding both. And I have audiences always saying, the IRS, I'm flying, they're all going, yeah. I said, yeah, it's easy for you to say. And across the street is the most busy museum in the United States, which is the Smithsonian Natural History Museum. We had to cut off all the water to the entire area. We finally figured that it's figuring out, we had to dig pits just to figure out where the water main break is. And the only thing the city said to us is, you better, and remember the road is kicked up, you don't know how much of it has been destabilized, you got to do this giant project, figure it out, get your inventory. Do we happen to have the piece of pipe that we need to get it in place? Once we find out wherever the hole is, dig it all up. And by the way, you can't do anything until you mark all of the other utilities in the street first. So you can't dig until you know where the electrical stuff is and the gas and all the rest, because if you dig without that, you could cause a much bigger problem. We waited 6 hours until we could get someone out on a Friday night to mark all the other utilities. And the only thing I heard from the mayor is, you better have that fixed and traffic flowing by Monday morning rush hour. Now, why do I tell the story? What I'm here to talk about is the evolution of clean water and greener water companies. And today, I've been in the job, I'm just finishing up my 7th year. And I can tell you, and I was saying this at the Met Council today, very impressive operation that I visited today, it's been the best job I've ever had. And I've loved every job I've ever had. Just been blessed in the jobs that I've had in my career. There have been a fair number of them. I switch around a lot. This is now the longest job I've ever held, and it's the best job I've ever held. But on that night, as I was standing on Constitution Avenue, and by the way, DC Water has on the order of 400 water main breaks a year. 400 water main breaks a year. And I'm standing there going, good God, what have I done? And why did I come here? And it wasn't why, like it's an important job, is that am I going to be able to overcome what I call the fist that was coming at us at DC Water, and I would argue are coming at water authorities nationwide. And even before I get to any of the slides that I have, because all the slides are on the good side. Let's see, how does this work? So I'm going to come to the slides, but the slides is all the good stuff. What are we doing that is really fun and interesting and exciting to be greener and cleaner and all that? But I want to describe first the absolute fear I felt 7 years ago, independent of trying to stop traffic in the middle of Constitution Avenue. But I think it is a fear that faces the water utility world nationwide, and some places much worse than DC, because while we have a very old, decrepit system, our city is thriving. There are plenty of cities that have old, decrepit cities and have lost jobs and population, and like Flint, that don't have the economic vitality or the stability of our core business, which is government, that DC does. So while we face this grand crisis, and I was really scared to death, and sometimes still am, I know that DC has it better off than a vast number of cities in the United States. So what's what I call the fist? The first is actually the first point, because of this presentation, I'm not going to give it directly, but I always call it hand over fist. The first part is the fist, the second part is the hand is all the good part, but the first point on the fist and the hand are the same point. And you made the introduction really well, which is, who thinks about what it is we do? It is a miracle of modern society, a miracle, I don't use that word lightly, that we all can go into any bathroom in any institution we are in, whether it's this school or your home or the church or wherever you've gone, go into there and turn on the faucet and water is, boom, ready to go. Every time, well, almost every time, the vast majority of the time. So much so that when it's not, it's an absolute shock. In the history of humankind, in my humble view, it's one of the top 5 accomplishments of human society compared to anything. To this day, more children die and more people die of waterborne illnesses each year than all the loss in all the wars of the world combined. When you do not have clean water, life is hell. And even if you do have clean water, but you don't have a system to get it to the people who need it, mostly women in the third world spend an incredible amount of their time going to get it and bringing it back day after day after day. And it's not always clean. And in this country, and not that many other countries, it's something that you rely on so easily that no one even thinks about it. That's incredible. People ask me, and I've said this afternoon, how many lives do you support at DC Water? And I always say, all of them. Water is what they look for in the universe when they're looking for life in another place. It's the only element that we know is essential to every life form that we know in existence, or any way we define life. Water. And that's what we provide in the water world. We're providing life to everything on both sides. By the way, DC Water distributes drinking water on one side. You use it all, it comes back to us, we clean it, put it back to Potomac, which is where it came from. So we do the whole cycle in the city. And we're delivering something absolutely essential to every life. The lives of the people who use it every day, which is everybody. But then all the living organisms that we clean it all before it goes back to the Potomac and out to the Chesapeake Bay, the largest freshwater estuary in North America. We are the largest single discharger to the estuary. And we clean that water for all those living organisms, which, by the way, is a huge billions and billions of dollars of economic value in what comes from the Chesapeake Bay, both for recreation, fishing, and oysters and all the rest. Crab. Just found out today that one of the biggest crab harvests ever is possible in Chesapeake Bay now because it's cleaner water. But we deliver that. And why would I put that on the fist? Because you compare this infrastructure that is essential to every single job. You cannot, and oh, then the other question is how many jobs do you support? Most people are asking me, how many jobs do you support at DC Water? But I always say, how many jobs do we support? All of them. Just like lives. In this town, in DC, in any town in the country, you cannot get a certificate of occupancy. You will not get the license to get into your business unless you can prove that you have water and wastewater services. And that's what we deliver. Without us, none of the businesses in DC work. Not a one of them. So we're essential to every single job and every single life. Who else can say that? Maybe power, but not at the same level. You can live for a while without power. Clean water is an immediate threat if you don't have it to your health and welfare. Now, the reason I put that on the fist is then I compare it to the second point. And you all have probably heard this if you're in the news. The Army Corps of Engineers, not the Army Corps, the American Society of Civil Engineers grades the health of infrastructure. And we just got a better grade in the United States because it went from a D- to a D. Now, I teach a class at Princeton, and I give Ds because when you give an F, there's extra paperwork. I don't know if that's true here. But when you do an F, you got to fill out all these forms and talk to deans and all this other crud. I say, if I give a D, the message is delivered. But I'm thinking, what was the American Society of Civil Engineers thinking when they gave a D-? Like, what's the difference between that and an F? I don't care. When it's an essential service to every job and every life and every organism, and you get a D, that's horrendous. The median age of a water main. You all science folks know that median means half of the median is older, half is younger, it's half on each side. The median age of a water main in the nation's capital of your fair country is 79 years. I've got water mains in Washington, D.C. that were installed before the American Civil War. And I'm sorry to say, I bet the people who installed them were not free. That's in the nation's capital. Our sewers are older than that. No wonder we have 400 water main breaks in a year. We have a system that's old and decrepit, and that is a national issue. Actually, in the last grade, because we've invested so much in our system over the last 7 years, we actually got a C. So we're better than that. We were really a C. I mean, what parent would say that when you get a C to your kid? You're like, what? We were happy with a C because we used to be down in the D level. We're going up, and DC's on the rise. We're going to get better and better and better. So we are doing better, but it is still horrifying at the condition of these systems countrywide. So you combine something that is essential to everything, is in a terrible condition, and then you get to the third attribute, which most people have no idea who does water work in their town. For us, most people have never heard of DC WASA, which is technically our name when I joined. DC Water, actually we're pretty well known now, but it wasn't true at the time. If people asked who delivered your water, like, well, I don't know. I never even thought about it before. People don't know us across the country. We're so good at what we do, most people don't think about it. So our customers don't know who we are, don't know what we deliver, don't know what it takes to deliver it. I'll give you an example. For the drinking water system in Washington, D.C., not huge topography, but there is topography. That's the Potomac and the Rock Creek. All this is coming down to flow to the Chesapeake. So it's flowing downhill. That's why around the edge of D.C. there was a whole series of forts built to protect it on the highlands from the Confederates who might want to come in the Civil War. And it's all flowing down, and we've divided the city into 5 topographical elevations. We have water supply at each one of those elevations, either above ground or below ground, with pump systems so that we're only supplying someone in the elevation from a supply in the elevation where they live. So if we pump water all to the top to the highest part of D.C., which is Fort Reno, one of the old forts to protect the city, we don't want to have that water fall all the way back down to someone in a low part of the city. All that kinetic energy would have been wasted. So it only supplies people at that elevation. So we have a complex system of valves, 37,000 valves in our system, 1,350 miles of pipes, pump stations, above ground, an incredibly complex system that nobody knew about. And then when it comes back to us, we have a much bigger sewer system. It's 1,900 miles of sewer pipes. It's from here, from D.C. to Albuquerque. You put it in a straight line. Again, giant pump stations above ground, below ground, 16 stormwater pump stations. This vast complex of equipment to get it all to Blue Plains, which is the largest advanced water treatment plant in the world. And people don't know about that either. So you put that first, the second, the third, and then the fourth, which is, well, the only way we're going to solve this is financing. We've got to invest. We've got to put money back in. And our financial systems have been so, not decrepit like we can't do accounting, decrepit like our ratepayers, if they know us at all, have been paying $25 a month for the service for the last 20 years. In D.C., the rates and the charges had not changed year after year after year. It was the same number. And it was nowhere near what the cost of service was to deliver the outcome. So we weren't getting any money in for capital replacement of old assets. They're getting older and older and older. They're breaking. There's water main breaks. The valves don't work. All sorts of challenges on that front. And we don't have, and our customers are only used to paying this small number. And one of the reasons is when you put in one of these pipes, they have a 60 to 80 year useful life. Most of our cities were being built and growing in the Industrial Revolution, turn of the century, the last century. So that's when most of this stuff was put in, and then you don't have to replace it for a while in a city because it's going to last a long time. So if you're sending a bill to your customer, even if you did full price, which most didn't, you're not including capital costs because now you're just operating the system. So what your customer is used to paying, if they're paying enough money, is they're used to paying the cost to operate the system, not to replace it. Had we been doing it right, the depreciation next year, we should collect every extra money, put it aside, so when these pieces run out, we have a fund of money that can start replacing it, like your roof or something. Nothing. And that leads to the fifth point of the fist, which is what scared the heck out of me, is that our industry was not known as being innovative. I described this today when I was at Met Planning, which I found it to be true that our folks didn't want to try lots of new things, but true for the right reason, which is if you're delivering a service to your customer that their public health relies upon, you can't be wrong. And an example I always use, those of us who are a little older remember this, was when Coke switched to New Coke. Complete screw up. None of us liked it. None of us wanted it. They turned it into an advantage. They must have spent a lot of money to retool their systems and brought out Classic Coke. Well, companies can do that because they can raise money. They can do all these things. If we put in a system for drinking water and it doesn't work, people's lives are at risk, first of all and foremost. You can't experiment with public health. And second, if it doesn't work, you don't have any extra money in your budget to do something else. You just got what you got. So if I have a very fixed amount of money and I worry about what consequences this would have on public health, I am going to go with what I know works. And that is a totally rational outcome. That doesn't mean you're not creative or innovative or any of that aspect. It just means natural incentives that are very powerful drive you to stick with what you know. Because then I know what I'm going to build, I know how much it costs, I know what the implementation is, my employees know how to implement it, we have the right manuals, we have the right training, we have the right equipment to build it, we know how to maintain it, we know what the costs are. I can plan and manage what I know. I try some new innovative technology like all these other industries are doing. Do I have the right equipment? Do my people know how to do it? What if it doesn't work? Am I going to be able to replace it with something else? Do we have inventory? When we have to fix it, do we know how to fix it? All that stuff makes you stick with what you know. That doesn't mean, by the way, that people in our industry are not creative. I found exactly the opposite. But that 5 points, essential service, nobody knows us, terrible condition, really bad financial fundamentals in an industry that doesn't change very fast, was the fist. Boom! That I thought was coming at me like a freight train, and I'm standing out there in Constitution, and I'm like, well, good God Almighty, this might be the biggest failure of my career. I don't think anybody. How are we going to do this? But the message I'm here to deliver is the last 7 years have been the coolest, the most awesome, wonderful experience of my entire career. By the way, there are lots of bumps along the road. So it doesn't mean that there aren't really hard days in this job, when there's water main breaks or upsets or sewage backups or floods or anything where the people you serve are furious with you. That comes with the territory. But the big picture is it's been fascinating, and that's what I want to spend some time showing you. The first thing is this question of, does our customer know us? Now, there's 2 important words I just used. Well, one in particular is, does our customer know about us? We treat the people we serve, despite the fact we have a monopoly, because you can't send your wastewater anywhere else in D.C. but us, and the populated parts of Montgomery, Prince George's, Fairfax, Loudoun, and Arlington. This 750 square mile area all comes to us. So we have a monopoly. But we absolutely have customers, because they have lots of choices they can make. It's not the choice in the marketplace, I'll choose this pair of shoes or that pair of shoes. They have to take our service, but they cannot support us when we need rate increases, or we need a decision by council to support a project, or we're going to be in their neighborhood and we need access, or we need to work with a neighborhood committee to how we're going to work out digging up the middle of their street. We need enormous interactions with our customer base, and for them to support us, not with the product selection they're making, but with all the decisions they can make to support an enterprise or not, most significantly being our rates. So we think of our people that we serve as our customers that need to be pleased, as well as any customer. And one of the attributes of our industry that I have to think, again, has this root in something very powerful and positive, which is the best thing in our industry is if there's no news. We're really good at what we do. We're so good at what we do, nobody knows us. That's sort of good. Isn't that amazing? I talk to our guys, they're like, yeah, aren't we cool? We do all this, nobody even knows. That's how good we are. And if we keep our head down and we're not in the press, that's probably best, because if we are, it's because of a water main break or something horrible that happened. Well, our views is you're never going to break out of this revenue squeeze of the support you need, of the innovations you can drive, of the new talent you want to bring in, of all the things you want to create a vibrant enterprise, if people don't hear about what you're doing and get excited about it. So no news is not good news. The first thing I did at DC Water was do everything I could think of to transform the manner in which we communicate with the people we serve. Because this is the world we see, which is all these water main breaks. That's the mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser. Our drink tap, that's our new logo. This doesn't have all the words on it. I was making fun of this. I found this. I put this presentation together just an hour and a half ago, because I usually just speak, but I was told, have some visuals. So I cobbled these all together. And I couldn't find the original DC that had all the words in it. For those at Med Council, you heard me describing it. But that was the old, and I wear this uniform, and I had that patch, but with a lot of words on it, because the DC Water and Sewer Authority was on it, and 2-sentence tagline. So those words were so little, it crowded in there, and you could hardly tell. And now I look back on it, someone came up to me in one of the neighborhoods in DC and said, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to work for you. And I was like, great, we have all these jobs. He says, I've always wanted to work for the Department of Corrections. And I was trying to think, and this is a bright version of it, so you probably don't see it, but I was trying to figure out, I was like, what? Department of Corrections? Is that it sort of looks like a hand, maybe with a handcuff? Who knows what that was? But you couldn't certainly read anything in it. And it's red, white, and blue. The other version had the Capitol Dome in the background of all that, so it was a very busy and all these words in it. No one knew what we were. So we decided we have to reboot the manner in which we communicate with our customers. And I want to be as good as Nike. Anybody. I don't care who we compare ourselves to. We got to be as clean, as lean, as aggressive, as funny, as fun as anyone to tell our story. So the first thing we did was we changed our logo. We had a big contest. It was hilarious. We opened it up to the public, had 178 entries with pool and bathrooms and all this funny stuff. Little kids were drawing things and sending them in, which was start of our first plan. People start thinking about you just by thinking of how they would design your new logo. But then we came up with what you see. DC Water Drop, water is life. That's on everything. You can see them here on the drink tap. It's our big program to have people drink. It's one of the best known logos in DC today, partly because we have 658 trucks, and that is on every single truck. White paint that jumps off the side. People are saying, we see your trucks all over the city. We see you all here, there, and everywhere. We were always all over the city, but nobody knew it was us. They couldn't distinguish our logo from anyone else or from the Department of Corrections, for that matter. So the first thing we did is we had to present ourselves, and the water's life is important. You know, this is the biggest change I have made, which is I used to think of water authorities as dischargers of polluters. That's on the basis that if my company makes this and there's a byproduct, we want to charge that cost of pollution control to the company, so that cost is in the price of the product. The polluter pays. But DC Water, as you mentioned, we're accepting all this pollution from everybody and on their behalf, cleaning it for them. So you all use it however you want. But we take it on your behalf and clean it before it goes back to the Potomac, which is where it came from. The biggest recycling program in all of DC is ours. And it's about water. We're an environmental organization. And you can see the people who work at DC Water like, damn right. So you could just sort of see them stand up a little taller, a little prouder, and work a little better, because that's why we have the colors we have. Water is life. We want to connect to something fundamental in the people we serve. And that was just the start. And I'll go through some of these pretty quickly. That is the lead infrastructure reporter of the Washington Post. We've been on the front page, A1, above the fold of Washington Post 3 times, twice in the Wall Street Journal, once in USA Today. We invite everybody to our stuff all the time. We don't wait for stories. We're constantly placing them and getting people to visit. And there's cool stuff. Reporters like visual things and stuff where they can take pictures and movies and things that are happening. And we have tremendous amount of positive media. We don't wait for it. We go get them. And that's one of our big pieces of machinery. He did a huge article. We have a huge social media program. Unfortunately, I just lost our hilarious social media expert, young, hip guy. He does social media in ways I don't even really understand. But these are some of the ones we were doing during the Super Bowl. And it was these arguments going back and forth, but it was drawing young people in. By the way, we're hiring. Any of you out there that want a good media job in Washington, D.C.? But it's amazing what we've been able to do with social media. And it's not just fun and games. The first place we hear about a problem now in the city is by tweets. The fastest way we respond is by Twitter. The fastest way we get to crews on site is by Twitter. It's amazing the speed of back and forth with our customers. This was a more significant one, which was over a flooding problem. What was going to happen? And Danielle had tweeted to us. Boom, we tweeted back and forth. She knew what was going on, and she loved it. She loved the interaction of getting that kind of speed. So I had, up till 2 weeks ago, a permanent, full-time social media person. And our Twitter account was voted the best government Twitter account in Washington, D.C. And it is funny. I have one at George Hawkins, D.C. They convinced me, and I actually have a great time on Twitter now. We do a tremendous amount of public outreach. I'm doing one of these tomorrow night. We do town halls in every town, every ward of Washington, D.C. We invite anybody who's contacted us for any reason over the last 5 years to come visit with us. We call them, we send them emails, we send them texts, we use all of our tools. And I have to say that almost nobody calls us to say, hey, the water's great today. People call us because they're mad about us for something. But if we don't draw them to us and invite them in to hear what they're mad about, we can't solve it. And it's like an illness that you don't solve. It just gets out there and the person gets madder and talks to their friends, and all that negative energy just gets worse. So as hard as some of these meetings are, and truth be told, I have 2 police officers that accompany me to these meetings. And one tomorrow night is going to be very rough because we've been doing very, very extensive construction in that neighborhood. And we've had some challenges with a boring machine that we've been using because of groundwater intrusion, actually. But that's one of the churches. We get full crowds. Most public meetings often have no one show up. We have tons of people that come, and they're fascinated. I do them all myself. We face our folks we serve. But what you can't see is around the back, actually it's outside of the picture to the left, all of our major offices of DC Water are there. Permitting, personnel, finance, they're all in the back. So if you ask me a question and I can't answer it, we're going to answer you tonight or within 24 hours. It's the customer service we want to deliver and the personal interaction. When people get mad and why you're doing this, I say, have you ever met the CEO of Pepco or Verizon or Comcast or Washington Gas or any of the other big enterprises that serve you? My bet is no. And I'm standing right here, and I do it every year. And we do lots of other ones too. And that distinguishes us from when we ask them for rate increases, which, by the way, we do in every single one of these. These are some of the other funny things we do. We do have Wendy and Wendell. That's Wendy. Remember I told you that today to see the bow? Incredibly successful mascot. The kids love Wendy. And she goes to schools, and she runs around with the presidents at the Nationals ballpark. We have tons of fun with Wendy. You can see on Drink Tap, Drink Water Responsibly, we have this huge program, and we use all of our trucks as billboards. Free advertising, just like a bus, except you pay for a bus. For us, we put stuff on it, how much it costs, why tap is better, what our wastewater treatment plant, how the energy, all the good things we're doing. It's our own truck. For the cost of the printing, we can advertise all over the city. This one is really fun. That is one of our summer interns. We allow our summer interns to design our next media program, so they must have water. We love this one. In fact, we like this one so much we spent a small amount of money and put that on the side of Metro buses. But that was created by our summer interns. And we hire a lot of these young, talented folks because we give them a chance. You've got a good idea, we will go with it if you bring it to us. And those are our water taste tests. We do blind water taste tests, our water to Deer Park, I think, outside of metro stations, out front of schools, big supermarkets, and publish the results. And to date, we have never lost a water taste test that our tap water, at 1,000th the cost of bottled water, has been ranked better than the bottled water that it's paired against. But we do that all the time. That's all of our various, I don't quite know what all those things are, but those are all of our social media things, which are really fun. But that was the first. Tell the story, tell it all the time, get media in. It doesn't mean we don't have tough stories. All that I ask from all the reporters we've got to know is give us a chance to give our point of view before you publish it. And that's what a good relationship with the media buys you. It doesn't buy you better stories. Well, you can play stories if they're interested. But when the tough stories come, what we want is the chance to tell our story and to give us a fair hearing, rather than the old days where they just pound on us. And the first time we knew there was a bad story coming was when we read it in the paper. Now we hear about them, we tell our story, and we hope to get them back. Then the next thing that starts happening is to unleash the innovation of the creative people in our agencies. Remember I said we're not all that innovative? That's not true. We're risk averse because of this essential service, no extra money. That doesn't mean we're not innovative. Our team, and I was joking about this, but it's still, when you think of our system, there's nothing quite like it. It's like owning a car that has pieces on it from cars over the last 100 years, all packed together on the same car. And when one little piece falls off, you've got to figure out which piece you're going to stick back in there, whether you're going to use one from the era where it came from or one maybe halfway in between, because the one it's connecting to was from 2000. The one connecting that way was from 1870. The one in the middle was missing. It's the creativity that our team is using daily to solve this ridiculously complex system with pieces from over a century of inventory. Is incredible. They're always, and I love, and I always say, my worst day at DC Water are some of my best days, when some really terrible thing has happened. We assemble the team in a little war room we've got, and I walk in and say, here's the issue. I'm a lawyer. I have got no idea what to do, but we need a solution. Have at it. And you just see the engineers and the sign, their eyes start to spin, sort of like they're on drugs or something. Maybe they are, I don't know, but because They get to solve problems. That's what they're built for. You give a good engineer a problem to solve, and they're like so happy they can almost think they caused the problems just to solve them afterwards. But it's amazing when you start unleashing that natural creativity that our people have. What can come from it? This is an example. It is the inside of a gigantic digester. 130 feet wide, that's a 13-story building side to side, 70 feet tall, 7-story building tall. And it is taking all of the crud that we have taken out of the waste stream coming into this gigantic plant and turning it into clean, permanent, green power. Now that is not that unusual. Digesters have been used by other facilities. What is unusual is our plant is so big, and to give you a sense of scale, a tanker truck that used to pull this biosolids, that's what we called it to be nice. This is sewer sludge, it's horrendous, it stinks to all high heaven. And before this project, this is the scale of Blue Plains, we had 60 tanker trucks a day of material coming out of Blue Plains. Think of that, all that would have been in the water. In the water. So it's great that it's not in the water. 60 tanker trucks, but our view is there's no such thing as a waste, there's only a wasted asset. The problem with digestion is that with that much physical biosolids, you couldn't build enough digesters on our constrained site, which is true in most urban treatment plants. You need to have enough digesters, so with all that new stuff coming in every day, it takes about 20 days for a batch to be eaten up by the little microbes to generate the methane, which is how you gain the power, that you need so many digesters that we didn't have enough space because we had too much flow through. So the team, I said, you've got to solve this. How are you going to figure out how to fit on the plant digesters in constrained space with this much quantity? They looked worldwide. They found a technology used in invented in the Netherlands, I think, that had been used at smaller scale, never used in North America, never used at the scale. We are now using it at DC. And it's called CAMBI, thermal hydrolysis. These are pressure cookers. So these babies right here, I think we have 32 of them. We have one whole building that does nothing but prepare all of the crud into a very consistent material that goes into those, heated up at very high pressure, very high temperature. They're brought out. You can just barely see it at the top up there. That's a flash tank. So when it comes out of the tanks heated and pressurized and depressurizes and cools, all the cell walls burst, sort of like a plate that's hot going under cold water. Once the cell walls burst, you put them in the digester, the little bugs are like, yeah, baby. All their food is accessible to them. They work faster, they generate more methane, and the quantity has been reduced because it's been reduced by heat. So all of a sudden, this technology that had never been used in North America nor anywhere at this size gave us the answer. And the question is, could we prove that it worked? So we had 40 published papers. We worked with local universities at low cost, because you get university people almost for free. Because what do they want? Not the professors, by the way. The students, the PhD candidates, what they want is a PhD. So we give them that. You get your PhD, we get you virtually for free. Just do your project on this. We had 40 peer-reviewed papers analyzing every piece of this to make sure we knew it could work. We took it to the board, a $470 million discretionary investment of ratepayer funds, and we built this damn thing. And it's running today, generating 13 megawatts of permanent green power. That's saving our ratepayers $10 million a year in electricity costs. We have cut our carbon footprint. We are the largest power user in Washington, D.C. Most of us are. If you carry a gallon of water home, I hope not often because you use tap water, but if you do, you realize how heavy it is? We're moving 100 million gallons of drinking water every day on one end and 300 million gallons of wastewater on the other end. We've got the biggest pumps and the biggest power draw of any user in Washington, D.C. So if we can save power, we're cutting the carbon footprint of the whole city. But the other piece, which we're going to announce next month, is all that crud of biosolids. We now have just about a third the quantity. So we've cut truck traffic, these gigantic diesel trucks, by 2/3. And it's now crystal clean by the high heat and the digestion process. And we're going to turn it into a natural organic fertilizer. I'll give you the secret name of it since you're here and we haven't announced it in DC, but it's going to be called Bloom. We're going to announce it in May. We're going to have about 400 wet tons of this stuff to turn into a material. It's organic, not chemically based. It's going to capture captured carbon, which is going to put into the soil, and we're going to sell it for the benefit of our ratepayers, all from this project. That's just unleashing the innovations. There's innovation you do on finance. DC Water was the first municipal agency in the United States to issue a century bond. That means we're going to pay that bond back over 100 years. Most municipal bonds are maybe 20 years, maybe 30 years. Most of ours are 30 or 35 years tax exempt. This was a century taxable bond. No one had any idea whether anyone would want to buy it. Imagine buying a bond that you don't get your principal back, and we're not paying principal until you're 90. 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, long past when we're all gone. That's when we pay everybody back, so their kids are going to get it. I don't know who's going to get it. But it's not going to be us. But it's because the asset that it is financing is a 100-year asset. We're building this giant tunnel underground. I'll show you a picture in a moment of the drilling bit machine that was used for it. But our engineer says it has a minimum useful life of 100 years. It's like the Roman aqueducts. These bloody tunnels are going to be there forever. If you have an asset that lasts 100 years, why don't you finance it over 100 years? You don't want to push on debt to your children that's unwarranted. But if that thing is designed to benefit them, why would you saddle that $2.6 billion project? Our tunnel project is $2.6 billion. Why saddle only a 30-year tranche of ratepayers to pay that enormous cost when it's designed to benefit 100 years of people minimum? So this is fairer. It also cut our borrowing costs. It was better for our ratepayers. We did, on finance, the very first certified green bond in the United States. Other green bonds had been done. We had an independent audit opinion that it was a green bond. Done by we didn't find any. There was no certifiers in the United States, so we went to Europe and found two. So we hired one of them, and they put us through our paces. This was not a minor thing, but it was a certified green bond. What happened? We were going to sell $300 million, certified century bond, no idea what was going to happen. We go up to Wall Street, Goldman Sachs up on their 40th floor looking out over the Hudson, all sort of excited. No idea debt issuance could be so exciting. What you do is you issue the price that you're seeking in the beginning of the day, and then all day long they're called book runners, because in the old days they'd write down in a book who was going to buy, and if there's more buyers you can drop the price. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon we had over $1 billion in buy orders. We increased our sale from 300 to 350 million, so we generated $50 million more of money to do our work, and we dropped the interest rate by 14 basis points. Saving our ratepayers $9 million, selling a green certified century bond. I didn't think of that. A CFO did. When you start these innovative things, everybody starts with it. This is the big tunnel we're building. Clean Rivers is what we call in the industry. Most of you probably are not in the industry. We know in the industry when you have we have something in D.C. unfortunately 772 cities in the United States have this problem, which is when our sewers were designed, they were designed to take both the sewage connection from a building and the storm water coming off the street. That's why it's called a combined system. It was so much better than what was there before. In D.C., it was nothing. We had open, the canal that went down and connected went right where Constitution Avenue now is, and it was filled with untreated sewage. It's horrific to think of what cities were like before modern sewer systems were put in. And in 1870 and 1880, that was a combined system. The problem with a combined system is that in a rainstorm, all that rain, you walk down the street, you see it all pouring into all the storm drains as you're going by, like, where does that go? That same pipe totally fills to the top, and then it pressurizes like a water main because there's so much storm water, and then it starts pushing that mixture of sewage and rainwater out. Because so much flow is coming in, it'll pop the manhole off, shoot it up in the air like a tiddlywink, except it's very heavy and very dangerous, and then it's shooting stormwater and sewage in the air. It's pushing flow back up sewer lines into people's basements. So our solution, that's what it does in the middle of town. On the sides of the town, it drains right to the river. It's called a combined sewer overflow. Terrible, terrible. It's just mammoth to solve it. So what we're building is the largest construction project in Washington, D.C. since Metro. It is 18 miles of underground tunnels, mostly 23 feet in interior diameter. I bet this is about a 23-foot ceiling. That's how big these tunnels are. They're enormous. And they're 10 stories underground. The machine that builds them is longer than a football field. They cost $30 million. They weigh 1,200 tons. They drill in the front. In our external affairs, I don't have the picture of it, we name each of the machines that we use. and we christen them. And the Archbishop of the Mid-Atlantic comes and waves holy water on them and puts in there's a saint for miners on the thing, and it's a very solemn ceremony, and we've named them, and they get their own Twitter accounts, and then they argue among themselves which is the better tunnel boring machine. But the reason we're doing that is because our customers are paying millions of dollars for something they'll never see, ever, unless we make it real to them. So we take tours. We actually are backed up on tours several months to get people down. We take them on the little thing and send them out and see. Well, our last mayor went in and we named one of the pieces of the tunnel after him and stuck it in the wall. Anything we can do to make this part of what people are paying for and are aware of. We have a lab. We are now selling the services of this lab to other companies. We're trying to get revenue back for our ratepayers. It's a huge lab. We built it because Blue Plains is so big. So we did that to give ourselves the ability to do research on Blue Plains, but now that we've got it, we want to offer that service because there aren't many bench labs out there. There's not enough of that work for most commercial labs to do the specialized bench lab. We didn't do it to make money, we did it because we needed it. But now that we've got it, and we've sunk that investment, can we turn it into a revenue stream? Along with the 30 to 40 PhD level papers that are happening at all times, year round, always new ones starting, to drive new ideas. And they're constantly coming up. We have our 4 first patents. We have our first licenses. We're selling our first intellectual property to other companies. We want to generate revenue back for our ratepayers. We're doing new techniques, cured in place piping instead of always digging up the trenching. These are the little devices we use to go into the pipe so we don't have to send people. Everything we can think of. This was one you saw before. This is our nitrogen removal program for the Chesapeake Bay. That's about $1 billion. This is our mobile command center. So if there's a problem in the city, which happens all too often, we mobilize the command center. Now other agencies want to use it because we're connected to everyone everywhere all the time with exactly what's happening, where it's happening, who's it's happening to, when it's going to be fixed, who needs to know what. We have the command center to do it. It's one of the best investments we've made. We don't use it often, but when we need it badly. And the innovation, this is one of our other innovations, and by the way, it shows both what we can do and what we didn't do. I brag about this, but I have nothing. In fact, I have nothing to do with almost anything at TC Water. I'm a lawyer. All I do is find really good people, encourage them, and then let them go. And it's amazing what they do. I have to raise the money for it, so I do have a part of the job, and I have to get approvals from various councils and committees, so I have my role in all that. But what the work is, what the cool ideas are, the century bonds, the thermohydrolysis, the cured in place piping, those little gadgets, I don't know any of that. What I've got to do is attract the best talent to the team, tell them that anything is possible. If they come up with a good idea that can do better, faster, cheaper, I want to know about it. And if it's a good idea, we will back you. I will find money for you. I will go to the board. And it's unbelievable the energy that drives in your team. This was, we were the first, and this is before my time, so again, I brag about it, but I have nothing whatsoever to do with it, even more than anything else that I don't have much to do with, is we did automatic meter reading. Smart meters in DC in 2002, long before most communities had thought of doing smart meters, long before I ever came. So again, I had nothing to do with it. But now we have all this information coming to us, and the question is, well, what to do with it? And there wasn't any software out there yet because we were the first big city that had ever done this. So we invented a program called HUNA, High Use Notification Alert. So if this is your water use, and you're trundling along here, and then all of a sudden boom, you know what that is? That's a leaking toilet or a broken pipe in your basement. And it's like if you leave your light on, the power company is going to charge you for all that electricity whether you're using it or not. So if the water's going by our meter, even if you don't know you're using it, we're going to charge you for it. But it's the worst place to be with your customer because they don't know they used it, they're mad about a high bill, they don't know where it came from, I didn't do anything different, why am I all of a sudden getting a double? So what we do now is we wrote a program that provides an automatic alert by text, email, or phone call to a customer if they sign up to let them know that something is amiss. We've sent out something like 45,000 of these alerts, and it's the best single thing we ever did to our ratepayers. That's awesome. But you know what we never did? We never licensed the idea. We never patented the idea. And we never thought, why do we partner with a software firm now that we've invented it and we know it works. We've field tested it in the crucible of day-to-day operations for a major American city. Let's go into business and sell this bloody thing. And that's where actually I want to end. I know I'm right near the end of the talk. This is, by the way, our boardroom, and when we're meeting, everything is streamed live, so you can watch us when we're meeting. Is what's next for water authorities? The first part is the outreach, the excitement, the communication. The second part is unleashing the natural creativity of the people who are already there. It's there. The question is, can we unleash it? The third part is to start some of these innovations with patents and intellectual property and how we gather and start valuing the intellect and the creativity of our team. The fourth is to rethink what a water authority in fact is. We're an environmental agency. We are a resource recovery agency. We want to know how to we're doing power. I want to cover our entire plant in photovoltaics. I want to generate power from heating and cooling from sewer. We have a 15-power energy plan where we're going to do energy all over the city because energy is a big deal to us. But in parallel to that, how can we start offering services to others? And I know this is a controversy across the country, where the big guys like DC Water, operating budget $575 million, capital budget $600 million, we're a behemoth. Oh my gosh, the little communities are worried about us. But here's the argument, the comment I make. This is like being a lawn care company. We are not interested in telling you what to do in your lawn, what to plant in your lawn, how often to cut your lawn. It's your lawn. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. I'm not interested in taking over anything. All I want to do for you, at your request, with you making all the rules, is I'll provide the lawnmower, the person who knows how to use the lawnmower, the truck that brings the lawnmower, the little shed we put the lawnmower in, we will repair the lawnmower, because we can spread that cost over your lawn and the next lawn and the next lawn and the next lawn. So you're still in control of your yard. We're just making it cheaper for you so you don't have to own the lawnmower, fix the lawnmower, and put it somewhere, know which one to buy. We'll take that on. We'll buy the best freaking lawnmower in the world. We'll have the best technology. We'll have the best training. We'll have the best maintenance program. That's our part. And we can make it work because, by the way, we use the lawnmower for our enormous yard. So we have a lot of experience with being a lawn cutter. And then we'll give you a price that is so much cheaper than if you had to do all those things yourself. But it's your yard. You decide how often you want us to cut it. Long, short, plants, not. That's your call. So we're not taking any authority away from you. All we want to do is make it cheaper and faster and more efficient. And all the creative things that we can do at our scale, which is hard for the small place to do, not because they're not good people, not because they don't work hard, they're just too small. That we can take the benefit of what we're able to do for our large enterprise and offer it for all the little folks. So you get the cool things we're doing just like we would at a lower cost, again, only if you want it. What that does for us is we charge an amount that is more than what it costs us to deliver the core service. So we get net revenue. That net revenue goes back into our system, to our old water mains, our old sewer lines. It reduces pressure on our ratepayers, and it creates a financial viability system that's good for the long haul. I think it's tremendously exciting. So I think I'm right at the end of my talk. I just want to say that I did go to the Met Council today. I was very impressed. I've always been impressed with your water and wastewater, or we called it enriched water at DC Water, here in Minnesota. I love this area. I have to say, this is almost an advertisement for you all. I'm very connected to DC, so it would be hard leaving, but I could see why you'd want to come here. You've got a whole host of really significant water companies, or companies that do water as part of their work here. We don't have that in DC. We want more of that. We have lots of companies that build weapons. But what we'd like to have is more of what you've got. And you've got all these, I know it's 10,000 lakes or 11,127, I heard all these numbers today, but you've got all this water up here, your expertise at it. You've got an enterprise that is not only an operating enterprise, but has a whole planning function. I've never heard of that in any other water authority in the United States of America. That is unique to here. And the capacity that this area has to make water a competitive advantage, not just for its future as a place, but for its economic future, to invest in the businesses and the capability. You've got tremendous, I love what the society is doing. I've gone online. It's an excellent organization. I hope you do join, by the way. And I say that sincerely. Every environmental organization, except for maybe the Freshwater Society, has a base in D.C., and every once in a while they sue us. But I still love them. They keep us all on our toes. They're truth tellers. They don't have any other motive than trying to provide the best information possible, so those of us making decisions make as good decisions. And when we think we're making a good one that maybe we're not, someone is out there challenging us. It makes us better. And the society makes water issues in this region better. But my own view is that the Twin City areas has a tremendous future in front of it on water issues by itself. And that, to me, is really exciting. And it's been a delight to be here at your side. So thanks so very much.
Nicely done. I said you were going to see the best wastewater presentation you've ever seen. Anybody seen a better one? Top 5? Yes, excellent. Tough crowd. We're going to set up the stage here for our question and answer. We also are picking up question cards. If you have anything you want the staff to pick up, hold it up high. They'll come by and take that index card away from you and do a little work with it, make sure it's readable. Dr. Forbes is quite clear about that. Don't make me try to read scribbles. We'll get them organized a little bit for her. And so we will be setting up the stage now to look a little bit more like a living room. And I'll tell you a little bit about our panel. Dr. Valerie Forbes is down here in front, is the Dean of the College of Biological Sciences and our moderator for this portion of the evening. She comes to U of M after directing the School of Biological Sciences at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Before that, she was the founding chair of the Department of Environmental, Social, and Spatial Change at Roskilde University in Denmark, where she invented thermal digesters. Just kidding, George. Can't back that up. Her work emphasizes the intersections of the environment and biology with multiple disciplines throughout the university, and that's why we thought she would be actually the perfect host for this discussion that we're going to have, because her work touches on so many things that come out of your plant. So I will turn it over to the capable hands of Dr. Forbes and ask the staff to keep collecting questions. And Valerie, come on up, and she'll be doing a formal introduction of Lisa Thompson. Come on up as well. George, we got comfortable chairs up here for you. And can we bring up the lights on center stage?
And plunge me into darkness.
Go ahead and get comfortable.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Steve. That was certainly the most dynamic presentation on wastewater that I've ever heard. And I spend my life studying water and, if not sludge, certainly mud. And that was very exciting. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting panel debate here. Before we do, it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa Thompson, who is the General Manager of the Met Council Environmental Services, which is based in St. Paul. And Lisa has a Bachelor of Science degree in Medical Technology from Winona State University and an MBA from St. Thomas University. Lisa's been working for MCES since 1983, where she started off first as the laboratory manager, and she subsequently held positions as Deputy Director of Environmental Quality Assurance, Assistant General Manager of Regional Plant Services, and Deputy General Manager of Environmental Services before being named General Manager in 2012. And in 2001, she was named the Star Tribune Working Woman of the Year. Yeah, I was very impressed with that too. Earlier this year, Lisa was made board member of the National Association of Clean Water Agencies and is also a member of the American Water Works Association, American Public Works Association, Water Environment Federation, and Water Environment Research Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Lisa. Well, so I know that you two have spent the day together swapping notes on the various systems in the two regions of your responsibility. Lisa, maybe you can just start by, from what you've heard, how are the kinds of things that George is dealing with similar to the issues that you're dealing with, and how do you see them as being really different?
Well, there's a lot of similarities and also some pretty big differences. I think maybe to start out, I'm really impressed with the fact that you started not in wastewater, but you landed there. And you loved what you did before, but you love this even more. As a lawyer, you were trying to protect the environment, and now you're actually involved in the industry and doing what you worked against a little bit beforehand. And I think I've got a similar feeling about my job. I love my job. And before I came to work for this organization, I picked a medical job because I wanted to help people have healthy lives and make a difference. And when I landed in the lab at this organization, I didn't realize how much of an impact they really do have on people's lives and health. And so I was like, wow, this is even better than my first job in terms of making a difference. And that one was pretty awesome. So I share that kind of a passion that once you figure out all that's going on in our industry and the difference we do, even though it goes unnoticed, it's pretty significant. And the people that work there have that same passion and creativity to make a difference. Ways in which we're similar, we're doing a lot to pursue energy. So you mentioned the thermal opportunities. We're doing some experimentation with that. We have done some solar stuff, and we are looking at our opportunities to be a partner and be helpful. So we recently did a solar collaboration, and we had like 31 different communities participate in that because we could do it once and do it on a large scale and get better opportunities for some of the smaller communities to participate. And so that was a real good opportunity for us to make a difference and meet our needs, but also help others as well.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's really interesting, the way that you've been sort of innovating to create energy and to make the systems more green. Do you think it's going to be possible to make them energy neutral at some point? Is that within part of the vision, or is that just crazy?
For DC Water, that is our goal. We're such a huge energy user, it's hard to describe. But that is our goal, is to be energy neutral. I think East Bay Mud, which is not a tricky net, but it's the municipal utility district for East Bay, which is Oakland. I think they have a facility that is energy neutral. So it has been done in our industry. Blue Plains is so huge and just absorbs so much power. It's going to take us a lot of work. But what's so fascinating to me about this is we all face things like climate change and alternative energy sources and all the rest. Treatment facilities like ours are everywhere. And every one of them can help generate electricity. So you start, independent of whether we'll actually be energy neutral or not, if every one of these institutions, like you've already done, like we're doing, starts thinking of ways to generate green power and you add it up nationwide, it all of a sudden starts becoming a very significant sector. And it doesn't rely on variations of wind. It doesn't rely on variations of sun. It relies on us being alive. And as long as we're alive and doing what everybody does, it's a permanent 24-hour-a-day power source. Yeah. And I sit on a board for an enterprise that worries about electrical liability. And in fact, the variation of generating power is a very significant problem for the grid, because you have to match up when the power is being generated with when it's needed. And having something like what we can produce at a treatment facility, which is 24-hour-a-day operation, which is consistent, is as important as the quantity. So the idea that's sweeping the industry, that to me is why it's, and for all the, not a lot of young folks here, but for young folks, this is the best industry to go into a career. Apply to these folks or any of them. They're just such a great place to do work now, because so much is possible. But that if every one of these facilities is adopting these energy practices, it's incredible the change that we can make. And this can happen 2 to 5 years in a time frame that's going to be meaningful to everybody in this room and all of the people we know. And it's so I don't know whether our goal is to get energy neutral. We're going to get closer with a whole variety of projects that we have on mind, but our energy use is great. But separate from that, the fact that we're doing it at all, we weren't doing it anything like it 10 years ago. And if all of us, there's thousands and thousands of these treatment facilities nationwide, they all start doing it, That starts becoming a big piece of the pie of energy source that's permanent and clean and does not contribute carbon for climate change. It's a tremendous opportunity.
So is that part of, I mean, is there some advantage there in being big? You know, I'm thinking another model, because you both are in charge of very big plants, right? I could imagine a model where you have smaller, more distributed systems, less pipe, less, you know, there could be advantages to smaller, there may be not, I have to phrase this carefully, not as much of a potential eyesore. Sorry. You know, you could hide them in the
And most people think of it as
landscape.
a aromasaur.
Well, that too. So, I mean, what is the main advantage of the large scale of these systems?
So I don't know whether to be envious of you having one huge facility or not, but we have 8. So if we're going to go energy neutral, we have to figure out 8 different types of facilities. They're all a little different. How are we going to go about it? So we want to reduce our energy footprint. We're looking at each, as we have to do upgrades or improvements at a facility, how can we make it more energy neutral and bring that along? So it's definitely what we want to work towards. We don't have that as our first goal. It's blended in with several goals that we have.
The question you ask is actually a fascinating one on a whole bunch of fronts. As far as the scaling, a lot of the technologies that we're talking about can be scaled large or small depending on the size of the plant. So you just have a much smaller digester or a much smaller. And there are others. I'm working with some of the students that I'm with at Princeton. I just met with them on Monday about putting this small systems essentially in the back of a trailer truck and you could truck it anywhere, place it in and connect it in to small, very small systems, and it would be self-contained little unit. And I can't remember what they're calling power in a box or something like that. It's a new business they want to start running. So there's actually some benefit of being able to do this in small scale. But the question that you're asking is one that is also sweeping the industry. Historically, we did our work on the drinking water side or the enriched water, wastewater side, in big centralized plants, in big cities anyways. And what's happening is that decentralization in a lot of the activity is happening, which I think is a good thing. It's a challenge to our business model, because when you're centralized, everyone comes to you.
Yeah.
But on stormwater management, we can try to manage it all in these gigantic, incredibly expensive tunnels, or we can have everybody capturing rainwater at their house in a rain garden, in a rain roof, in a rain barrel, using that rainwater to help grow all the things they want to grow, which is water they don't have to buy from us, that's potable water. It's less stormwater going into the system that has to be managed by a big pipe. That's a distributed system. But it gets people reconnected with the water issues at their doorstep, rather than it comes into my sink and goes down the drain and I have no idea. No, I'm now part of it. I'm part of the water system. I'm holding it right here. My yard looks better. More trees. And I'm buying less, and so that's good for me. The business model that I think we both can take advantage of is, well, that does cut into the centralized business model, but there's no reason we can't provide a service to that home in implementing that new green infrastructure. We can do that service for a fee. So we just have to modify our business model to follow a dispersed system, which on both ends, in California, in the areas where there's drought, water is being used on site not just for trees, but for flushing toilets, even in some rare cases, even for potable water. And I think that's going to become more prevalent rather than less as water scarcity becomes as much of a problem as too much, which means holding it on site and using it rather than sending it into a pipe and sending it away. It's an asset. That's valuable. But that's a dispersed system, and what our institutions have to do is modify our business model so we provide that service just like we also provide the central service, so we can do both. I think it's another opportunity in the industry.
And are we trying to do any of these kind of other services here?
So we're a little bit different model than George has, because we do wastewater. We don't provide water supply. We're involved with the planning function of it, and same with surface water. So we don't have quite as many trucks out on the road as you do and things of that sort. But we do have opportunities, I think, because of the size and the skills and the expertise that we have to probably do some more things that the region might be interested in. But we are coming at this with how can we collaborate and integrate in ways that will advance the needs of the region. And we're in dialogue with the rest of the region on what are the needs and where might we be able to partner with them.
And I met some of your team earlier today, the Green Infrastructure team. So they've got a whole really fun, interesting group of folks who are helping communities do green infrastructure. It's great for the towns. And I think that is something that is essentially sweeping the nation, because there's so many benefits that can come when you use the stormwater that we've always channeled and gotten rid of as fast as we can, that instead we think of what could we use it on site. In a place like DC, which is beastly hot in the summer, if you have a tree, it's like the most, oh my God, I can get in shade. Which when I turn a corner on a street, I look to see which side is in shade as opposed to not, because it makes a difference when it's 108 degrees with 95% humidity. It's brutal. The more trees we can get, that takes water, and the summer is when you have the biggest challenge. If you're containing it off stormwater, all of a sudden you start getting air quality benefits of the trees that absorb ground level ozone. These multiple benefits start adding up from thinking of the water as the asset on site. Rather, we're going to channel it into a piece of pipe and get rid of it. And I think that's happening in communities all over the country, and I think it's a good thing environmentally, and it's a great thing for the city, and it's a good thing for us.
So, but as you pointed out, I mean, this project that you're doing with the giant tunnels to separate the stormwater from the water treatment, I mean, it's hugely expensive.
Sure is.
It's an engineering challenge for sure. I mean, is that possible in a lot of places to really truly separate? As you pointed out, at the time, that was a great advance, but now we recognize the problems that it caused. I mean, are we going to be able to do that, to separate stormwater from wastewater?
You've got good news here.
I've got great news
Oh,
here.
good. Let's have good news.
So
One of the reasons I want to move up here, just for this reason alone.
we're mostly separated. They started doing that.
All the really old cities that are, anyways, go ahead.
Right, yeah, in our newer suburbs, they were separated from the
Okay.
beginning, and separation took place, a lot of it took place starting in the 70s. There was federal aid for that and grants, and so we tackled the majority of that issue decades ago, and I think that's helped us. If you look at our rates, there's some things that you guys are paying for that we've already taken care of.
Yeah, and to clarify, we actually aren't separate. We have done a few small-scale separation. And for everyone in the crowd, when you have a big, by the way, the scale of these pipes are like what you see in movies where trucks are driving underground. Our big Northeast Boundary trunk sewer, which is one of the oldest in the city, was built starting in 1880. And it ends up, it's beautifully built too, the craftsmanship back in those days. It's a brick arch sewer. Starts at 6 feet in diameter, ends up 22 feet, and it's shaped like a U. So the top is beautifully brick, comes down to a U, to a flat edge, and then there's a lip at the bottom. The sewage flows in the lip at the bottom. The entire rest of that 22 feet of capacity is all for the stormwater that pours in a storm. And storms have gotten more fierce. The Northeast Boundary trunk sewer, when it was built, Northeast Boundary, this is way down in the southern part of the city, because there was no development to the northern part of Washington, D.C. Back then, when there was no trolleys, there was no cars, you didn't want to live way up north because you couldn't get down to the center of town. So everyone lived south, and the Northeast Boundary was the northeast boundary of Washington, D.C. Now most of the city is north of it, all going to that same pipe, that huge thing that overflows. So we don't actually separate it. It's still mixed together. But now where it would, today in a big storm, either pop off the manhole and go into the street, which is horrendous, or be overflowed into the river, which is horrendous. It instead goes into this drop shaft that drops down 100 feet into the huge tunnel below. So it's still mixed up together, and that tunnel takes all that excess rather than it going to the street, and the tunnel conveys it all the way down to Blue Plains, where one of the biggest pump stations in the United States of America is going to have to pump all of that flow 10 stories up to the surface again, where it will get full treatment. So that is the largest construction project in D.C. since Metro was built.
Wow.
And there's 700, and Cleveland is building, Kansas City. Now there's a lot of cities that are facing these enormous costs. And like I said, it's very hard on our ratepayers. D.C. has a very wealthy portion and a very poor portion. It's this tale of two complete edges. We have almost no one in the middle. We have this very high end, and we have a very low end. And for the low end customers that we have, that is tough.
Yeah.
To pay the cost of these, but we're still better off than most of the cities that are facing this, that don't have the economic vitality that DC does.
So let's talk about rates for a minute, because you pointed out that, we're not paying for what we get. And I mean, we've heard this before. And I mean, these rates are something that you all set. You indicated that there are things that customers here don't pay for or do pay for that they don't, or vice versa. I mean, how do you set those? There have been discussions of making different graduated water pricing, so a lower rate if you use up to a certain amount, and then much higher rates if you use above a threshold. I mean, what are your thoughts on how to fix this?
So first, maybe I should comment, we have our version of rate pressure from stormwater as well, but ours is from the old pipes that need to be, that have started to leak, so when there's a lot of rain, they can seep into those pipes and come down to our plants, so we get spikes because of that. And so we're in the process right now of doing a lot of rehabilitation for pipes, and that's where most of our capital budget is going at this point.
And that can be paid for based on the current rates that are charged, or are there challenges there?
So our rates increased more last year, and we'll probably see increases over the next several years because of that rehabilitation of our pipes. So that's also a cost driver for us.
One of my favorite topics is rates. By the way, I know someone from the St. Paul Water. I thought, this is really good water. And I do drink water everywhere I go, obviously, we all do. But I pay attention to it maybe more than the average bear. And there's no aftertaste or just, this is really clean, crisp water. So you do a good job, St. Paul. By the way, I will not present in programs where they give me bottled water. And like, how come? I'd be like, that's inviting someone from Nike and giving them an Adidas shoe. Come on now. But rates, when I started at DC, we have a bill that if you're a DC resident, you get everything. So it is wastewater, drinking water, storm water, everything is on one bill. So the full water cost of being in DC is delivered to you on one bill. And when I arrived in 2009, the average single-family bill was $42 a month. This year, it is $92 a month. So we have we are now charging almost up to full cost. So that was one of the reason we're doing all this other stuff is because the financial needs of the enterprise were so great that was driving everything else. If we could not raise additional revenue, we were doomed. We would have to do the big tunnel project. That is a mandated, court-ordered consent decree. And lots of enterprises like ours end up with mandates, either through a court order or a permit issued under Clean Water Act. But when you have a mandated project issued by law, you always find the money for those, because if you don't, you go to jail.
Yes, that's
so you do the regulated project, but what you don't do if you don't raise enough money is fix old water mains, fix old valves, put in new fire hydrants, do other pump stations, all the stuff which you all, in fact, rely on every day. When that gets older and older and older and older, the mandates take your money, you don't do all the other stuff, the maintenance gets worse. In fact, your financial picture gets worse. Because it gets older, you start plowing more and more money just to Band-Aid it.
Yeah.
So we have raised rates last year 13%. This year is actually the lower of our rates. But as I said, it's more than doubled. And we knew we were going to fail in presenting that case to our customers if we didn't catch their imagination and help them understand. There's often, you'll hear, not just for water, but folks will say, oh, we did a survey and people don't want to pay more for water. And I'm like, of course they don't. If you ask me, do I want to pay more for coffee, I'm going to say no. Do I want to pay more for anything whatsoever? No. I don't want to, I paid less, yeah, that's a good answer, unless you can prove to me why. Make a value proposition that an investment in water is worth it and needed, which is this whole communication thing. It's all to draw people in. We're doing this, here's why we're doing it, here's why it's needed. My dream, I have a public meeting tomorrow night, it's going to be brutal, because we're raising rates again, I do it all, and we have, as I said, a problem in this neighborhood. But my dream is that when I go to the customers and say, we need $10 more from you, they'll say, oh, Mr. Hawkins, how about 20? Guess what?
Yeah.
Never happened. But we have gotten support from the DC Council across the board for the rates that we have so far. You're never as good as your next game, so it doesn't matter what we've done. But we've been able to raise the rates because I think the people we serve understand why and what it's going for and why it matters to them that these rates come in. Okay. So rates do come to a matter of describing and communicating with your customer first and foremost. We actually have instituted, we've decoupled our rates like we hear about. We have a rate for our low-income customers. We have a subsidized rate for the first to conservation. We do all those things. But the big picture is the number is going up. And we projected out 25 years. And we project rate increases every single year for 25 years. And I don't know whether we're going to achieve all those rates, but we're going to fight for every single one of them like it's our last. And it's going to require us every day telling that story to our customers.
So I'm happy to report that I haven't had to take police with me to any of our meetings when we've talked about our rates. So that's a good thing. We are a wholesaler to the communities, so in order to figure out what the homeowner pays, we do a survey to find out what each city's attaching, because they have pipes that they have to maintain in their local community, so that gets added into the cost. And the last time we did the survey, we were about $250 a year.
I'm moving. You're lucky.
So Lisa, George talked about several things that keep him awake at night. What keeps you awake at night with regard to water?
It's usually when there's a big storm.
Okay.
So there's a big storm coming, and there's been a lot of rain. You know, are we going to have problems as a result of the pipes not being able to handle the capacity? And also our plants, are they going to be able to take the flow that's coming at them without problems? So if they run into some issues, will they be able to handle it?
Well, let me make sure I get some questions in from our studio audience here, since they took trouble to write them out. To switch away from rates, are either of you concerned about antimicrobial resistant bacteria present in the biosolids you'll use as fertilizer? I guess this is your clean fertilizer that you're producing.
Whenever anyone asks me, am I concerned about something, my answer is always yes. And I don't mean that as a joke. We worry about everything. I mean, we're delivering water into people's homes. It's the only infrastructure that people ingest. So we're very worried about and aware of almost every issue. The biosolids, this is called a Class A biosolids, which is a very super clean. And to give you a sense of how clean our stuff is, and I can't remember what the contaminant is. Maybe it's bacteria or E. coli, but it's 1,000 colonies or below means you're Class A. You could use it on a schoolyard if you're 400 or below. Most Class B is up around 1 million or something. You get far more in a Class B product, which is what we've had. We're testing our stuff and we're at about 10. I mean, it's just these infinitesimally small numbers. Because of the incredible high heat and pressure that sterilizes it. Does that mean that we're not worried about things that might be there, like drug or microbial resistant, that are already all around us? And we are seeing those kinds of things in the water that's coming into the plant from upstream. It's like the pharmaceuticals and all that's being used in farming. There's low levels of these things all around us. And does that worry me? It sure does. It actually worries me a little more on the drinking water side, because that is something that obviously everybody's drinking all the time. We're all worried about these new emerging contaminants that our testing regime is able to find out is there. So we know it exists, but it has gone past medical knowledge of what it actually means. It's hard to make a cost-benefit decision of whether or not it's worth it to remove something if we're not health professionals, we're like engineers. I'm not, but our team builds stuff. They're like, if the health professionals tell us we have to remove this, we'll figure out how to remove it. At the moment, the health professionals don't really, at least from what we hear, aren't really sure what does 1 part per billion of this thing mean or not in human health. But do I worry about it? I absolutely worry about it. There are things like PCBs, which I used to worry about when I was an EPA official. PCBs was a product everybody used because it dissipated heat in transformers. It was a good thing until many, many years later we found out, well, maybe not. When they put MBTE into gasoline, it was a good thing until many years later we found, well, maybe not. And then it's so hard to get rid of it once it's already there. Now, DC Water is not putting all this stuff in the water. It's being used in farm fields. It's being used by all of us, and it goes down the drain when it goes through our system, or we dump out medicines into the toilet. All these ways that contaminants that are in small quantities but are reasonably ubiquitous, it's a tremendous worry. Mostly at the moment, we monitor all of the health news and make the best decisions we can under the circumstances. And at the moment, what we think we're doing, and EPA advises us, is safe, but we're always watching. And if something changes, we'll change on the dime with it.
And that, by the way, is one reason we need more biologists. That was just a small commercial break. Okay, next question. Someone wants to know what % of water is lost to system leaks, and what does it cost in lost water value? Anybody want to take a stab at that ballpark figure?
That is an analysis we present to our board every day. One thing I'm very pleased that we do, we are a public enterprise, but I think we're willing to compete on our performance numbers with any organization of any kind anywhere. That doesn't mean we'll win, but we're willing to compete, private or public. I don't care. I want to know what the best performance measures are, unit per cost of anything that we do. And we report on a whole series of them to our board by the month. And as we want to look at our efficiency, and are we getting better, and how are we doing, and all the rest, just like any company would. You're investing in us, we want to tell you how we're performing. One of the measures is non-revenue water. And it's something that you hear about across the country, that 30% of all the water that at great expense is cleaned to potable standards is lost in the system before it arrives to the customer because of leaks. The same kind of leaks that are causing infiltration on the stormwater side, wastewater side, is losing drinking water. A leak in the drinking is all pressurized. You have a leak, boom, there's water shooting out of that pipe constantly. The number we track is is usually around 15 to 20%. But the difference in DC is that most of that water loss is on purpose. We're actually constantly draining water out of the system. When you run a drinking water distribution system, and this is all language I didn't know until I came in, but you worry about the age of the water in the pipe.
Okay.
And at the very ends of the system, so the last of your customers, the water that's going to them through water mains isn't moving very much. Where someone who's earlier on, there's always throughput going through those pipes, so it stays very clean. At the back end of it, that water sits in the pipe a lot more, so if there's corrosion or anything, you get more water, perhaps quality problems, certainly aesthetic problems with the water. So in those neighborhoods, and we know exactly where they are, we regularly go out there, turn on the fire hydrant, and essentially create flow through the system artificially, because we want clean water to be rushing through. It cleans the pipes, it gets fresh water into the system, and that's most of what we lose. So yes, it is non-revenue water, but at least in this case, it's on purpose, because we're doing it for a reason.
I might want to pop back because I didn't answer the one about the...
Please do.
And people here might want to know where we sit in the region.
Please do.
So most of our solids are incinerated at our large metro plant. And so there's no bacteria left when that's done, it's ash. It's a fluid bed incinerator, which also is very energy. In fact, I think we were high on the list of energy creation until you came along with Canby, so now we got to catch up to you guys. But and it has a really good air pollution system on it, and so EPA built a lot of their current standards based on the facility that we have. We have two small facilities that do generate biosolids. One is a Class A, uses a heat-dry process, and the other is a Class B, which it's pretty small, so it's mostly going on our own farmland, but we are looking at a way to get that off of that system and onto something else. But I'm with you. We need to pay attention to those kinds of situations. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria is resistant to an antibiotic that they want to use if a patient has an infection. Doesn't mean it's more resistant to chlorine disinfection or all the other things that you might use to disinfect bacteria. So we need to learn more about these organisms, but it isn't necessarily a big threat to humans to to have it in the biosolids.
And by the way, I totally endorse the notion you said about the importance of biologists. We hire a lot of, and I joke about the PhD candidates, but we just rely every day on good science being done by young professionals. And we wouldn't be doing almost any of the really cool projects that we're doing at Blue Plains, which ultimately become engineering projects. The great thing about being a utility is that nothing ever is just a concept. Ultimately, we're going to build something. So it becomes an engineering project, but before that, it's almost all science, biology, chemistry, and having the best minds, having good, creative, good minds coming into the field, it's helping us prepare for the future, and I totally endorse it, the idea of you out there who are doing it, my hat's out to us, because we rely on it every day.
I didn't pay him to say that, by the way. I didn't. So someone's asking about Flint, not surprisingly, and how that whole crisis has or is impacting your work.
We've been talking a lot about Flint. The city that had a lead in water crisis before Flint was Washington, D.C. So I think I've done 40 interviews in the last 3 or 4 months on Flint. And it's an issue that hundreds of cities in the country have. There's almost never lead in the water bodies. There is almost never lead in the treatment process. There's almost never lead in the big water mains. That's just not always true, but it's almost always true that where the lead comes in is the connection from the water main in the street that connects to the residence is called a service line. And lots of those are lead, particularly for homes that were built 50, 60 years ago. And that's what Flint has. DC has 12,000 lead service lines we know of, probably 6 of the full. And by the way, you hear in the language, there's a private side and a public side. It's just when that line comes from the line in the street, part of that is under public space, and that's called the public side service line. And then part of it is on the private property of the homeowner or the business owner. That's called the private service line. Sometimes the meter is in between, sometimes the curb is in between, sometimes it goes right up to the wall of the home. But there is a private side of the service line and a public side. The plumbing in the house can have lead solder, it can have lead fixtures, it can have galvanized pipes that collects lead and corrosion, and you can have the aerator on the pipe itself where the water's coming out collecting little bits of lead. What happened in Flint is a tragedy for all sorts of reasons, but and the most important one is the health consequence. But it's a real tragedy for our industry because it has put the entire drinking water profession in a bad light for a knowable, predictable problem that everybody knew. When talking to folks who are professionals in water, oh, you're going to change your water supply from one source to the other, do corrosion control. It's not maybe do corrosion control. It's like, could you? No, do corrosion control. It is a foregone conclusion that that's what. It's not expensive. And it was, and every water we have a tremendously good corrosion control program in DC, which is why lead levels, despite the existence of, if you do corrosion control properly, doesn't eliminate the source, but it will keep the lead from leaching into the water. It was a known problem, and they just, for reasons that I still don't totally understand, it does not make sense to me that relatively inexpensive steps were not taken, that everybody in the industry knows should have been taken. So this was not an industry issue. This is some other pressure was being put on the industry that came to a terrible conclusion. The outcome is that there's been a lot of attention to the fact that hundreds of cities still have these lead lines. And where you can manage it well by using orthophosphate, that's what they're now using in Flint, that's what we use in DC, lots of cities use it. It's a food-grade additive that creates this film on the inside of the pipe between the drinking water and the lead that would leach in. But the source is still there. And it's going to be expensive, and it's going to be disruptive to dig up all those lines and get them out. But that's the conversation everybody's having again, which is, yes, we can manage it and do, but the best solution is to eliminate the source so you just don't have the potential of an upset into the future. And that's a cash money question. It's the same, it's just another one, and I don't mean to belittle it. It's a huge question. But when you're in this industry, we've got 50 of them. You've got the new pharmaceuticals, you've got your old pipes, you've got fire hydrants that are, we had 17 models of fire hydrants in DC. How do you fix fire hydrants when you have 17 models dating back 100 years? So now we only use 2, and we're replacing them all and GIS mapping them. But that was incredibly important because it's fire suppression. There's almost no issue that doesn't come to us that when it's there and the person who cares about it is in front of you, it's the most important issue on your list. Except you've got 10 most important issues on your list. Lead is definitely one of the very, in my view, one of the highest ones, because it's one of the few that apparently causes consequence to the development of children, which then lasts. And what's the last thing? And particularly for families who are not able to have the money to replace their lines or buy a lead-certified filter, although we'll give it to a customer if they think they have a problem. And that's the last child we want to have a problem. We wanted to have those kids have a chance to make it in life. And to set them back to start off is a tragedy. But it is, in our industry, it's just one of the many, many things that are coming at us. It's just one of the more important ones of those, in my view.
Lisa, do you want to add anything?
Not a water supply provider, so I think George did a great job.
Okay, good. Let's see. So I have one here for George. Could you talk about the political environment in which you operate, and how do you deal with the politics?
The other you-know-what that's produced in D.C.? And D.C. is a very, very interesting place to apply our trade, because I obviously have as customers every member of Congress, every member of the House, the Senate, all of them. They're all customers of ours. And the reality that has come to me, because I've had a lot of them call over the years, the Vice President's office called at one point. We had to do a repair for something for that affected the White House and congressmen and senators, is whatever point of view they have on infrastructure funding or what government should do or not do, wherever they are on that equation, when the water's not working in their house, they want it fixed immediately, and it does not matter what it costs. And the reality of that to me is brought home, that ultimately water services are not a political issue, a party issue. Everybody wants good water service. And it's again a case we have to make. It is a very charged political atmosphere, which is why we spend so much time, not big P politics. I'm agnostic. I have, I guess, personal political views, but I try to forget them as much as I can, because it's just not part of my day. I've got to make friends and allies with anyone and everyone I can make friends and allies with. I want to make no enemies that I can help. And I want to serve everybody, regardless if I think they have the worst views of anything ever. I still serve them as best as anyone else. But we have to, what I'm hoping we're trying to do is make the case to a group of folks who seem to think that government shouldn't do things except when they need it themselves, and then they want them to do it. And just to remind them, you want us to be efficient? I'll prove that. I don't want to be inefficient. I don't want to waste money. I want to do all these things with measures and numbers that we can prove we're as good as anybody. But the investment in this is something that everybody cares about. And it is not a party question. It is not what party or what political views you have. The desire to get clean water to people and to clean it afterwards and put it back to where it came from is ubiquitous and important. And so we tread very carefully. The only thing we don't tread carefully on is tap water. We regularly go to Congress and try to get them to not use bottled water and say, we'll give you free, what do you want? We'll give you like the reusable glasses, and we're always hammering away on tap water. At the local level, and this is what we do in these big town hall meetings, what is interesting with as fast as our rates have gone up, that we have a very strong program for low income. And not that I don't care about wealthy folks, I do, but I worry about them less because I know they ultimately can pay. The category that puts the most political pressure on me because I believe it the most is fixed income seniors. Folks who have worked hard in their lives, they've retired, and they have a very fixed income, are often not wealthy, so they were sort of the mid to upper middle class. And as you're raising water rates, they're not poor enough to get any of the supports that you give for the low-income customers. And they have to take money from somewhere else, from a fixed pie. So every dollar that you're charging more for is in fact a dollar they have less for something else. And I just had this, I have this tomorrow night is an area with a lot of seniors on fixed income. The last one I did last Thursday was an area. And I just, my heart goes out to that category of customer And it always makes me really nervous about when they organize well, that A, it could stop the rate proposals we need, but the reason it makes me nervous is they've got a point.
Yeah.
And I wish I could think of something that would help that category. And that's the political, honestly, having survived in a very turbulent political world, it is like a TV show. The stuff, when you get called out into the hallway and you're meeting with this, it's always sort of crazy. But my view of how you survive it is just get calmer and calmer, because it's always turmoil, so if you just stay calm, mostly you can survive. The political turmoil that bothers me the most is the part that I think is real. And it's our fixed income and middle income customers that I worry about the most, because it's real. And our whole team worries about that. They're right. We have to raise the rates. We have to do this work. We've got to do it. But the point they're making is right. And that scares me. How do we make the society we live in with these costs that we face affordable for people in that middle income category? Fixed, or none of our employees can live in DC anymore. It's too expensive. And that's a real challenge.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question from the audience for Lisa. What is the Met Council Environmental Services doing or has a plan to do to increase and connect public awareness to our water services here in Minnesota?
Well, we're going to try and have more of an identity and get more communication out. So I think you said you have 13 communications folks. We don't have anything like that within ES. We do have within the council a lot of support for communications, but we've recognized that it's important for us to get off from under the radar and to get out and provide more assistance in terms of understanding our situation. So Minnesota we're in an enviable position, and we'd like to keep it that way. And I think that the region and the community has paid attention to water. Of course, we got 10,000 lakes. It's hard to ignore it, right? So if you look back at our history, I think we've looked at situations and taken pretty prompt action proactively to keep us in a good place. So I think our challenge today is to understand what are the real threats that are going to maybe change our future in a way that we can't quite anticipate yet, and to figure out how we can work together towards a better water future. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to look at the future and see what kind of situation we can make better.
You know, a comment I would make, I know you didn't ask me the question, but I've spent a day now, so I'm only dangerous about but I have to say that of all the things that the council will do, this is the easiest, because they already do so much good work. I've been impressed with what I've learned since I've been here. Telling the story is the easiest part of it. The hard part is figuring out what to do, going out and doing it, and doing all these complicated projects all over the place. That's hard. And that's what they do very well. I'm really impressed with a lot of what I've learned since I've been here. Getting a person or maybe two people over time, and I didn't get 13 all at once. I went over a year. Each year, once the board saw the benefit of one, then you get the next. You do it in stages, step by step by step. And I don't think we'll ever go more than 13. In fact, we're down at 10 because we had some people leave, so we're hiring. But the idea of once you do the hard stuff, of just the little bit of extra talent that you bring in to tell the story is the easiest part. They've got the story there. Now all I have to do is present it, and I think it's a golden story. And this whole area, with all the good things that are being done on water in the Twin Cities, it's a story, not only, as I said, not only waiting to be told, I think it's a competitive advantage for this region for the next century, and it's a great way to build.
George has inspired me to consider Twitter too, so.
All right. Excellent. You're braver than me.
I'm going to be calling in for lessons. So.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on, and I want to thank you both for a fascinating discussion, and to thank you all. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions, but you might be able to grab the speakers afterwards, but thank you for your attention. And as we used to say in Denmark, skål, and thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.